I grew up in the countryside, and one day me and my brother went into the farmer's field next to our house, and we made a little fort in the middle of the cornfield. And to do that, there were like 20 stalks of corn that we kind of pushed over and beat down with our feet. And by total happenstance, my father discovered this little fort that we had created for ourselves in the middle of the cornfield. And my father, who never lost his temper. He was absolutely livid. And I've never forgotten how insanely angry he was at what we had done to this farmer's corn. Now, why is he so angry? It's not because we had harmed the farmer. This is a 20-acre cornfield. We maybe has thousands of corn stalks. We probably destroyed $1 worth of corn, if that. It's not about harm. He's angry because what we had done was wrong, that we had taken someone's property without their permission. And in my father's eyes, harm and wrong are totally different things, right? They are non-overlapping principles. And to his mind, wrongfulness is not contingent on harmfulness. Right? It was irrelevant what the cost of the corn we had destroyed was. The fact is that we had violated that man's property. Now, that is not the way we construct our moral positions today, right? Harm is now the way that we understand wrong, right? When we want to penalize or stigmatize a certain kind of behavior, what we do is we first categorize that behavior as harmful. We don't think there's any other route to call something immoral. That if you want to say that it's bad, you got to prove that it comes with a price, that there is some kind of penalty that's being paid by the victim of that particular act. I had a podcast episode where I talked about the protests at Princeton over African-American students who wanted to get Princeton to change the name of the Woodrow Wilson School because Woodrow Wilson was this unrepentant racist, which he was, by the way. He was like a seriously unpleasant man. And I think that they are 100% correct in saying there is no earthly reason why one of the premier graduate schools in the world should be named after a guy who was unspeakable. I mean, he was unspeakable. Not only that, I recently read, given to me by someone in this audience, John Maynard Keynes' book on the post-World War I peace processes. And he has a riff about Wilson, who also was attending those talks, in which he just eviscerates him and points out the man was just a blithering, bumbling idiot. And that's another reason not to call your school after him. Why would you call your School of International Affairs after someone who was terrible at international affairs? Right? Not just a racist, completely incompetent. Now, what arguments do the students make when they're trying to get Princeton to change the name of the school? Well, these students are members of a generation that lumps harm and wrong together. So when they want to make a claim about something being wrong, what do? They speak in terms of harm. So their arguments are largely, not entirely, but largely in terms of harm. They say, that name harms me. I go and I see his picture on the wall and I feel excluded. I hear people use that name and I think this is not a place that welcomes me. They use one harm argument after another. Now, with all due respect to the protesters, who I agree with 100%, I don't think that's a good argument. I don't think you can plausibly argue that if you are a student at Princeton University, you are harmed by the name on the side of the school, right? These are kids they have 99.9% IQs. They are at one of the greatest schools in the world that is so wealthy it can pay for virtually all their expenses. They're getting an amazing education that is the envy of the entire world. I'm sorry, I don't buy it that they're being harmed, right? I can think of lots of people in this world who are harmed by racism. I don't think undergraduates at Princeton belong on that particular list. More to the point, they're undermining their own cause. Now, why is that? Because there's a great argument to be made against Wilson. And that argument is the argument that naming a school after a guy like that is wrong. It doesn't have to produce harm. It's just wrong, right? It's wrong for a modern university to celebrate a man as reprehensible as Woodrow Wilson. In my podcast, I suggested that if they want to change the name of the school and not change the stationery, they should just name it after someone else with the last name Wilson who isn't reprehensible. And I suggested a number of them, including Owen Wilson, who I think would be the the point is, they don't make that argument. And why don't they make that argument? Because that's not a moral argument we make anymore, right? That's an argument that belongs to a previous generation that was able to separate these two terms. So in other words, I'm profoundly conflicted about this. I can understand some of the enormous strides we have made as a society because we have moved those two terms together. But part of me, at the same time, understands that there is something really important and also in some ways beautiful about separating the notion of harm from the notion of wrong.